Hello, I'm Noir Vortex, moody Noir Vortex, and this is going to be a video. I've been writing a bit more recently. Well, I've been writing for the last few months, but I wanted to just do a video where I read recent draft work in progress for some of them pieces. They're all somewhat loosely linked, mostly short stories, some very short, some flash fiction, but also some shorter stories. So without further ado, I'm going to get on with this. I'll briefly introduce each piece of writing and then briefly talk about each after I've read each one, and it'll probably be about 15 or 20 minutes long, maybe a bit longer. So, without further ado, here we go. Now these are all things that are sort of might eventually become a book, so watch out for that as well. Not sure of a title yet, but there we go. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Transcendence. The hum of my ghost vibrates in neon abstractions in the distance. I hear the melody grow as I enter a trance. The wires descend, plugging her in, as she looks at me, bewildered, bewitched, and sad. A cybernetic nest in eternity, the light shines down in rainbow spectrums as the tesseracting cubes above our heads rotate in and out, pulsating, swirling. We stare, see beyond, realize the magic of technology, transcending into the dim neon lights of the Nether Net. So that's the first one, Transcendence. I'm quite happy with that. I like some of the concepts and imagery I explore in it. It's just a short poem, 3 stanzas. And I like the mood it captures. It captures a mood of intellectual engagement, but also a sort of poetic imagination connection to the technological idealism maybe, but also the realities of it. But that's what I'll say about that. Next one is another poem. It's the last one because I've only done these 2 recently. It's called We Spoke Through Forked Tongues of Love. Good night, for I dwell too long in your electric dreams, the ghost in the corner, the god in the machine, more wolf than man, more child than grandfather. Neon lights blind us in the end, relentless, burning souls heated red. Hum, 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 will we river from the root? My eyes shined like polygon diamonds on a gloomy night, and you are far away. Winked, shaped silhouette, an illusion, such a wonderful illusion. Love. Thus spoke Zarathustra. So that was like, in all honesty, I'm going to be just brutally honest here. I had a breakup 6 months ago, and that poem is about that. There you go. A little bit of heartbreak. That's that poem, basically. He's a fucking gorilla. A Metatragedy. Now, this is the first story. You'll probably notice in the tone of the stories that some of my stories have got a bit more humorous in some ways, less serious, a bit more absurdist and silly and social commentary, but I won't ramble too much. He's a fucking gorilla. A Metatragedy. Joe Rogan decided to have a clone made of himself. He made the decision as he looked out on the sky burning outside of a green tint, acid rain hitting the desolate wasteland like marbles of pain. We were all plugged into a live VR chat with Rogan, and the third iteration of the metaverse as the master Rogan interviewed the mutant, defected version of himself. A sort of sloth from Goonies Rogan. And it was then that the mutant Rogan dropped the bomb. I be released as an NFT. I make yourself a Rogan starter kit, digitally distributed over the metaverse, brought straight into your virtual house. Sort of Rogan Lego set with detachable head, ends and cock. Cool. Ever tried DMT? The Master Race Rogan replied. The mutant stared for a minute into the Master's eyes, and a tear began to form in his eye. And then the Master leaped onto the desk and started thrusting in a disgusting manner. Pelvic thrusts in the digital void, as he became one with the monkey within, eventually doing a full shit on the table, smearing it everywhere. We all watched in abject horror through the images pumped into our dead eyes, and bought the NFTs to stave off the pain of meaninglessness. The first man to ever go insane in the metaverse, Mark Zuckerberg's brain descended down from his giant tower made of the souls of dead poets and sang, "You are good! We like you!" Everyone nodded in agreement, and the like notifications pinged for an eternity, burning our acid-rain souls. DMT! Dynamite! The end. So, that was a sort of, stream of consciousness story I wrote. Obviously a few things going on there, sort of commentary on social media and the metaverse and NFTs and just the absurdity of it all, really. Anyway, next one is very autobiographical, with that specific awareness that it was autobiographical. And I guess in a way this is something I was going through myself. It's essentially, well, you'll figure it out. The Boy Who Loved the Dark. I'm pretty happy with this story, actually. This is the story of the boy who loved the dark, and in turn how the dark loved him. It was 12 AM. Chris looked above at the star in the distance, contemplating the enormity of it. That squid of swirling in a vortex of nothingness. The womb from which he was born. Eternity. He was alone, stuck to the ground like a magic spell had wrapped itself around his feet, cutting into his very being, as he was overcome with something between emotion and absolute detachment, an ecstasy of morbidity, a melancholy of the moment. Drowning in these waters again, a dreamer without woes or worry, save for the idleness of the infinite, the ticking of the clock, tick-tock. Ha! Chris sniggered to himself. Think I had a bit too much of the old spice tonight. Better hit the hay. And with that, he collapsed. Like a forlorn, dying star on his sofa, melting into the eternal and one deep slumber. The passing of dark to light, of dreams to reality, reality to dreams. Chris awoke to the sound of morning birds coming through his window as he slowly opened his eyes, letting the light in, shining through his thin curtain windows. Yawning, he slumped out of bed, still a little baked from the night before, and proceeded to his work chamber. Assignment number 287. The Maelstrom Project. A shifting red light moved slowly across a neon green screen, as Chris darted his eyes around the screen, directing energy beams of data from one spatial node to the other, to the next, linking concepts and visual maps into a sense the machine would be able to digest. Assignment number 287 was all important and hush-hush, of course, though Chris would have had a hard time describing what it all meant ultimately, and aspects of the code were kept locked out even from him. Protected data silos, linking the real and the unreal as well as making a gluttonous mess. And it was a mess that appeared before his eyes. A true maelstrom, if ever he had seen one. He was looking at his own code, and it was then he discovered that maybe coding till 12 AM at night so high that you thought the sun was talking to you isn't the best idea when you had a mounting list of features, bugs, and the sheer random chaos of code to contend with. Escapism, the moral enemy of every programmer. The poison we dare not taste, for we know how sweet it can feel and how it can rot our mechanical hearts. He examined the code he was managed to produce the last night in he thought, a flurry of creative energy and problem solving. There were moments of good engineering in there. Some of the code structure certainly made sense. But there was the dodgy it was the dodgy-looking sharp edges that bothered him. Half-completed functions hung like half-finished love affairs, or a half-eaten bacon sandwich. Pure violence. His code was punching him in the face, beating his confidence to a pulp as the inevitable intake of breath every programmer knows. This was crunch time, and Maelstrom had to be delivered next week, so there was no choice. Besides, who had ever committed suicide from looking at their own bad code? How bad could it be, and how bad could it get? He knew the solution would be caffeine. That much was inevitable. You had to know the uppers and downers to be a good programmer, at least in the world he resided in anyway. The spectres of information in a darknet dystopia. He dived into the chaos of his programmatic Rosetta Stone and sighed, as if the overall structure there, the foundations as it were, there was bad workmanship on view from many angles, half-finished functions that returned unreliable data, sharp edges which could bleed were wont to fall on them, and the scaffolding was, in a phrase, a pile of concrete shit. Hours passed in his chamber of work as he scribbled on the metaphorical walls of the cave before him for the answers to present themselves. Fixing bits in here and there was slowly leading to a structure of sorts, but he had to admit defeat. He was struggling, his eyes slowly drifting back into his head as inevitable fatigue began to hit. It was 11 o'clock at night. Already, the sun had receded far away to be replaced by the glimmering lights outside, and the urban foxes wandered endlessly. His mind wandered. He could leave it, of course, but there were a few functions almost mocking him, goading him with their untapped secrets. So close, yet so far, he thought to himself, teetering on an anxious edge. Then his mind wandered to that new substance his dealer had given him a few months back, left untouched in his storage box. An old copy of Neuromancer by William Gibson with a secret storage box. It was called Sorcerer's Stone, the dealer had told him. Much stronger than his usual dirtweed. This, the dealer promised, would really take him on a ride down a spiral of meaningful insanity. Well, in fact, he actually described it more like, "This is some good shit, lad." Would he repeat the same mistake again? It was a foregone conclusion by now. Chris lifted the strange substance out of his tatty old copy of Neuromancer. It was clumpy green but glowed with an unnerving ambient pulsing glow, the likes of which he had never seen before, an almost hypnotic glare that pierced into his soul. He lifted it out carefully and reached for the wooden pipe on his shelf, carefully loading it up and grabbing his lighter. He took a deep breath and inhaled. He felt nothing. Returning to his computer screen, he scanned the screen looking for areas of improvement. Suddenly, feeling more alert, more awake somehow and conscious in a more cerebral manner than before, the Sorcerer's Stone was obviously starting to have an effect as he began to type frantically, his fingers themselves blurring as he stared downwards. His fingers began to take on a mind of themselves as he disconnected from his body. Stretching onwards and inwards, he felt the feeling of disconnection as the stone took control of his fingers, furiously slamming down on the keyboard as he drowned in static light, the whiz and buzz of the machine embroiling him in the vortex of cascading zeros and ones as he became beyond binary the pulse of the machine. He was high as fuck. Stunning bright light shone in through the curtains, piercing Christopher's eyes as he blinked once or twice. His head had fallen like a rock on the keyboard of his computer. He glared at the sun and the dawning of the night light, awakening slowly to a new day. He looked up at this code. He looked up at this code to inspect what he had done the previous night, a night where it felt as if some force external had guided him through a maze of spectral green-lit neon abstraction he hoped to treasure. he ran the Maelstrom program, smiled. The interface booted up with a magical whir, and the data visualization from the government database looked perfect. Its three-dimensional graphical forms appearing, platonic forms in the digital nexus. It was beautiful, and Chris took a moment to feel proud. Then, the assignment 287 source code was shipped to the cathedral's databank, whizzing across cyberspace to be applied on some distant colony. Assignment 288 landed on his desk. Chris looked at the sun and grimaced, his melancholic state returning as he accepted the reality of his existence. A hamster on a wheel. A boy who loved the dark. That's the end of that one. That I'm actually pretty happy with. And it is interesting when you write. It's obviously a self-insert. I mean, I can't even deny that. There's like no point denying I'm a programmer or any, I program and I'm very intense about it. I really enjoyed writing that story. I think it's one of the better things I've written recently. And on that note, I'm going to read a fresher one now, which is very much more experimental, very much horror based. I mean, that last story had some poetry and some. It was not a horror story; it's a science fiction story, right? But this is sort of like a horror sci-fi story, so it's quite provocative. I'll warn you now. I guess I should do this. There's like trigger warnings for violence and some other stuff in this story. So if you're not up for that, then obviously skip this story. Flesh Arena 22. So I've only written this recently, so it's still fresh. So it'll be interesting to read it. The man and woman looked at each other in the darkness, naked, exposed. In the dim neon light of the arena of the flesh, he trembled as he looked at her exposed breasts, his hand and penis dreaming of rubbing himself all over her luxurious, shiny, pert tits. It was being broadcast on every channel to the animals outside, salivating at the images before them as they breathed heavily, desperate to see the day's sacrifice. "Let the games begin!" shouted the perverted plague prince from his throne made from the bones of long-gone nuns and priests. His altar to naive virginity and purposeful impotence. The naked man laughed an insane, loud, booming laugh which echoed around the arena. The woman exposed to the elements cowered in fear as she heard it, witnessing the beast before salivating like a wolf ready for the kill, drooling like some creature of the raw, unconscious id. "Before you strike, obeying insane mad wolf, at least let us talk a little first," she protested. The prying eyes rolled from their monitors as a collective groan echoed through the chambers of the arena. "We want action. We want fucking. We want death. We want spectacle. We want violence, rape, destruction, and chaos. And lots of it," they bleated like dead, glitching monotone calculators. The man looked around, his face stuck in a grimace as they encircled each other. He snarled and stared at the woman intensely, growling and getting ready to pounce as she circled him like a hawk ready to strike upon its prey. Her eyes darted, guided to his direction as they spiraled around each other in a lament of lust and violent potential. The audience cheered as the ceremony began. The spectacle would unfold soon, the tragedy in the vesseling vent, for their dead, dull lives below, chained to energy reactors. These beings were no more than humanoid batteries, paralyzed, gluttonous beings plugged into a reactor core, coils and wires stuck into every orifice, feeding a giant machine, of which this perverse arena was just one single element of the debauchery. Then the wolf pounced with a terrible howl, striking him in the face, blood pouring from her eye as he struck with his exposed large hairy paw, howling in bloodlust as a wolf does, screaming at the blood-red moon. She grimaced, stepped backwards a bit, but remained firm in her place. The batteries cheered and whooped with delight digitally, seeing the horror unfold before them, giving them some semblance of meaning in this cold, dead, clockwork, mechanical world. So that's the end of that one. I mean, I've only written that like literally 2 days ago. Obviously, it has a very disturbing aspect. It's basically, I guess, essentially, it's about. Well, the key thing it's about is the violent impulse that exists in human beings. There's also a sexual tension there, but it's very disturbing sexual tension, and also it's about the idea of human beings and media. How media sort of distorts our perception of reality. That's essentially what it's about, with some sort of extreme metaphors and language, I guess. I actually like that story, and I've read it. It's short but quite impactful, I think. And the next two are just like very short flash fictions. I actually wrote this a few months ago. Locked and Lost. Mandy looked up and blinked, looking over the seemingly endless horizon, her machine iris flickering in strobing light as she surveyed the scene of destruction around her. Red-hot explosions in the distance, shimmering crescendos of light through the dust, the sound of the end. Looking down at her hands, her exoskeleton half melted by the flames, she screamed in agony, a sound that echoed through the landscape surrounding her. Her tortured frame writhing as she realised what she had done. Was it all for nothing? Would she ever be free of her programming? That was the question. And the answer? A riddle. A paradox hidden away in some engineer's brain. So that's the first of the flash fictions did. Just short, sweet, just gives a bit of an image and atmosphere about this being. And this is the final one of these sort of short stories and experimental pieces I'm collating together at the minute. There is a bigger one story I'm working on too at the minute, but it's not ready for showing yet. You and Me Forever². This is the final one. It's a flash fiction. She looks outwards with her mutant eye, scanning the cybernetic birthing pod, the witch's wormy womb which had spat her out. The thought echoing in her mind, not yet understanding what it meant. He looked down at this creation with a sly smile. A smile which, though betraying a certain arrogance, nevertheless contained a deep care. You, he said, softly bearing down on her with his gaze, his eyes widening at his creation. You and me forever, just like it was before, he proclaimed, a certain melancholy present in his voice, as if recalling some faded, distant memory. And that's how it was. It's how it would forever be. So again, another short flash fiction, but I do like obviously the key concept there is this lost love and science, mad science, Frankenstein science, that sort of thing. Oh, beg your pardon. Anyway, that's some of my recent writing. I'm writing more again, basically, and also I want to start planning for another book. So that's sort of the main reason for this exercise, is share some of these stories. If you've got any thoughts or feedback, then let me know. If you find it interesting, any of the stories, which one is your favourite, what do you think of the style, what do you think could be a driving theme in these stories, what themes do you see as potentially something that could link them all together. Obviously I'm going to do whatever I want anyway, but it was good to get ideas from other people on how how I can edit this thing, which I'd like to do it within at least 6 months. I want to get another book out. My last one was a good experience, but I want to take it to the next level with the next collection, basically. Anyway, that's that. Been Noir Vortex. I hope you enjoyed that, and in a bit, like and subscribe. I'm going to try and do more of these ambient reading sessions anyway. I think it's quite fun. Have a good one.